What up, Pod Squatters? I'm Anita Wong.
And I'm Tiffany Lee.
We're investors, real estate agents, and the co-hosts of SARE Ladies, the girl power arm of subtle Asian real estate.
Every episode will feature funny, casual conversations with dope AF participants killing it in the real estate game. But also mostly people like you and me, just trying to figure it out. Stay for the drama and lulls. We're not pulling any punches.
But first, a quick SARE Ladies announcement. Hey sorority sisters and pod squatters, Anita and I are planning our first sorority girls weekend in Dallas, Texas this November. We'll be bringing you more tailored education, more female-driven networking opportunities, more fun activities, and of course, more deals in Dallas. So if you'd like to be kept in the loop on all our sorority field trip updates, DM Anita Wong or Tiffany Lee through the Subtle Asian Real Estate Facebook page with your email address, and we'll add you to our exclusive mailing list. Hope to see you in Dallas. Now on to the show.
Hello, Pod Squatters. We are so excited to be speaking with Hoa Nguyen today, who's been such an influence and mentor to Anita and myself in scaling our own business partnership. Dr. Hoa Nguyen is, get ready for this, guys, it's a mouthful. Hoa is an entrepreneur, an author, co-host of the Financial Freedom Show, real estate investor, philanthropist, and eye doctor. Which, by the way, the eye doctor part seems like a footnote at this point, given how prominent you now are in the real estate space, right? So Hoa is the CEO, I love that, CEO, and co-founder of Blacksteel Investment Group. She has $460 million in assets under management in real estate and has invested in over 6,100 units as general partners and limited partners across 23 apartment communities. She's owned 2 successful eye practices in Dallas, Fort Worth named Eyepieces over the past 10 years and co-founded Blacksteel Investment Group to help families and busy professionals invest passively in apartment communities. Personally, she is a blessed mother to her adorable 8-year-old daughter, Athena, and proud wife to her life partner, aka, I love that you call him your lover on Facebook. Her lover, she likes to call him, Dr. Jaime Gonzalez for 17 years. By the way, Anita and I did some stalking on your YouTube, and I love the story of how you both met each other injecting eyeballs in medical school. I was like, that's so gross. But so romantic, I guess. Hua's passion is to travel the world so she can immerse in different cultures. But I think most notably, Hua has selflessly made her mark by empowering the youth, empowering women, and contributing back to her community, working with many nonprofit organizations. So without further ado, please welcome Hoa Nguyen. Hoa, hello.
Hi, thank you for having me on. I'm so excited.
Yes,
you have been a long anticipated guest that we're so excited to have you on. And wow, what timing. Thank you for making the time. I remember when we were like first, but met you in Dallas. I met you in Dallas. And then I remember met Tiffany. I told her all about you. And then SARECon happened. We had our whole event, and then now we're here. We're so excited.
I'm going to jump on that. Anita says something interesting because the first meeting me and Anita had with each other where we were like introducing and we're like talking about syndications, your name came up immediately. And I was like, who's Hoa Nguyen? She's Hoa Nguyen. She's like, you have to tell me. Anita's like, she's a total badass. I met her in Dallas. And then so you were like hyped up in my brain, and she was like, we have to get her on. And by then you were like an abstract idea to me. I was like, sure, whatever. And then I met you at SARECon in July. I was like, you're right. She's awesome. I love her. We have to get her on the podcast.
Well, I love what you ladies are doing, and I'm so honored, to actually meet you, Tiffany. It was like, man, hearing your resume, I'm like, whoa. And then Anita, I was like, oh, I'm so blessed to be part of this, and I love what you ladies are doing. And I can't wait till you guys come here again.
We're so excited. Yeah.
Will it be your first time to Dallas, Tiffany?
It would be. Yeah. Yeah. Our upcoming trip. Hua has like spoiler alert, Hua's gonna be a big part of the Dallas trip that we have coming
Hey,
up.
I cannot wait.
So Anita, let's jump into it.
Yeah. So Hoa, you have an extraordinary story. Can you tell our listeners a bit about who you are, where you came from, and how you got into real estate?
Yeah, my story's a little different because it's funny when people ask me where I'm from because I don't quite know. The shortcut answer I always say is, oh, I grew up in New Orleans. But the reality of it, my background, I was born in the Philippines, actually, in a refugee camp. So I didn't come to the US until I was about 8.5 years old. And so I was in Philippines, then Germany, and then the US. And then once I got to the US, I've been all over from the north migrating. So I've been in 13 schools before I settled into New Orleans. But the shortcut answer when someone asks me is like, where are you from? Hoa? I'm from New Orleans. So that's kind of where I grew up essentially. But very humble backgrounds. Like my parents were, people are like, oh, are you Army brat and not moving all over? I'm like, no, refugees, and they're just trying to find a job in America, right? And so my dad passed away young. And so when my mom, single mom, so I started working like with her by age 10. So you talk about some work grit, like the restaurant business is no joke. I mean, that's like 16, 18 hours, 7 days a week. And so my mom was working 7 days a week, and she took the bulk of the three of us, like taking care of three kids. And so I always because we grew up we grew up in a little trailer my mom bought for $3,000, right? And so super humble beginnings. And so I always wanted to kind of get to that financial and live that American dream. And so I wanted to become an eye doctor. Early on in my career, I didn't know what I wanted to do. My mom was like, I don't care what you do, just become an entrepreneur and be your own boss. And that's kind of embedded in my mind early on. And she never went to school because she was a girl. She wasn't allowed to go to school because she was the oldest of 7. And so through that journey, I was like, man, I want to do really well academically. And so I did, and I became an eye doc. And I met Jaime. You talked about injection, how we met, doing eye injections. He was my lab partner. And so I was blessed to be able to meet him. It was like love at first eye injection,
Oh. I'm getting squeamish.
You know what's funny? How did you feel? Were you nervous when you were about to inject the eye?
Of course. And I was like, you have to have a lot of trust for someone to do injections in your eyes,
Wait, it was a live person? It wasn't like a cadaver?
It was live injections. They're called it's saline, and it's subconjunctival injections. But they're real syringe, and you're really doing injections. And if you don't do it properly, a blood vessel will burst, and you'll get a subconjunctival hemorrhage. And which most of 70% of our class was walking around with bleed in their eye. And Jaime and I did a good job with each other.
Oh my God, you had to do it to each other? It wasn't even an actual patient. You guys
I've always been a loner. I'm not part of the social scene. I was never growing up, never popular. I was never part of the social outgoing scene. So I would go to school. I would work 2 or 3 jobs. And I would come to class and just take my test and leave. And then clinic, because you have to be there and it's interactional. And that was the first time we actually got to really engage. And I didn't realize that he was keeping an eye on me, right? But
I called that, he had an eye on you.
You kind of okay, so we graduated, and it's man, finally we're doctors, right? And then we came out with $350,000 of student loan debt. Oh my gosh. And Jaime's super humble. His parents are humble beginnings, and so we came out with super in the negative. I moved to DFW. We were dating at this time. I moved to DFW. I'm so close to my family, and to kind of go to Dallas, have no friends, have no family. We were just newly dating, and then to kind of ground my roots here. And I had an opportunity to practice for someone else. And so I worked for someone else for 4.5 years with the intent to eventually buy our own practice once we had enough money. And so we did that. I worked 7 days a week. I had a 5-day-a-week job salary for someone else. And then I did what's called relief work, which means I worked every Saturday and Sunday for any eye clinic in DFW that needed a doctor, because that was an extra few $100s each day. And so talk about hustle. And we did that. 4.5 years in, we bought our first practice, now Eyepieces. And then 3 years after that, we bought our second location. But the journey of real estate, why that even came about, was like after we were practice owners and like we were still doing like 70 hours a week, and we're still hustling and working 6 days a week in our own practices. And then when my daughter was born, like it took us 9 years to finally have Athena. And so once she was born, like our priority really shifted. Like I've always been like, I like to work. But I got to a point where after my daughter was born, like I didn't want her to have second best of me. And so that everything changed after having her, because it was so hard. And we so wanted a daughter, and being a mom like changed everything for me. It wasn't more about just the money. It was like, man, now how do I buy back my time? And I know real estate is the vehicle of building wealth, and I needed to diversify, but I didn't know how to like do the real estate. And so it was a big learning curve. I was still working full time. And then I started listening to different podcasts, reading tons of books, going to a lot of local meetups and then conferences. And I learned every different avenue of real estate. And like out there, I was like, okay, do I want to wholesale? Do I want to flip? Do I want to do, single family? Do I want to do hotels? There's just so many avenues. And so I kind of just, my first real estate venture, ironically enough, was in Belize, which is, I did my first real estate investment out of the country because it was a place I loved. I vacationed there 7.5 years ago, and I fell in love, and I said, I just want to buy something here, and so we bought land. We custom built a home. So I was like, the plan is we'll vacation there, and then we'll Airbnb it out when we're not there. And so that was our first way of doing real estate. And then we wound up doing more land, buying more land. And then we bought into a hotel. It was the first branded resort there. And then eventually we got into multifamily. And then so almost 5 years ago was when we first started learning about multifamily apartment investing in the syndication space. And so when we learned that, up to that, prior to that, we were using our own money for pretty much everything except for the hotel, which was a syndication. But when we did the apartment syndication and we learned, oh man, all these apartments. And so we passively invested first into multifamily. And so we did like 8 different deals, joined a mentorship program to learn the ropes, and just kind of started building relationships with brokers, with lenders, started learning how to underwrite, tour properties. But we kind of were very active, passive investors, because we knew the end goal was we wanted to be able to transition to a more flexible space. And multifamily was it was easier to scale. And we met a lot of people who were like, man, a lot of average people were like, for everyday people are able to do this. And I was like, man, I can do this. Like I'm ready to put in the work. I'm not scared of the work. I'm committed to it. I just need to learn the skill set and the insights of how to get these large transactions done. And so my very first passive investment was with a group that was part of our ecosystem. And I got to become really good friends with them. And then so I partnered with them as general partners. And they had already been in the business over 15 years. And they were vertically integrated. So I learned a ton, because I think the best way to learn is to do. And so once we were actively, as a passive investor, diversifying with different sponsors, gave us an opportunity to learn, like, hey, when it's our turn, we know kind of what we like and what we don't like, how to communicate with investors and what to look for, and kind of learn the ins and outs of property management and things. Even though you don't do anything on the active management side, it's good to know as a co-GP whether you're going to be the asset manager or not. I would like to know the A to Z. Even though I'm not going to plan on doing A to Z, I like to learn every part from the underwriting, acquisitions, to the equity, to the operations. Like, that's how I operate all my businesses. And so relationships are super important. But because of the multifamily, as we were cash flowing from our real estate, we started hiring associate doctors. So it started freeing up our time in our practice. And I kept hiring more help as my real estate income started increasing. I used that cash flow to keep hiring more people in my eye care practices so that I could, gradually buy back my time to transition over to multifamily. So before, I was working 70 hours on average in my practice. Now I work 2 days a month. And so it's been a huge transition. And now my schedule, honestly, even being an active co-GP, I probably actively spend about 6 to 8 hours a week on both of my businesses. And so it's really freed up a lot of time, but I needed that cash flow in order. And both of them are great because I get the cash flow from my practice, but really the real estate income now has gotten to a point where it's surpassing. And so, so it's great that even if I didn't want to practice anymore, I can really depend solely on my real estate income now. So it's been a big transition.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I love it. I want to
wait before we jump into the next question. Yeah, what were you gonna say, Nita? I was just sorry. I was just curious. Like, at what point did the switch go off in your head where you felt like you learned enough and you were ready to take the jump and do it and be a GP? Like, at what point did you feel comfortable?
Probably almost a year and a half to 2 years in.
Mm-hmm.
After probably roughly about 2 years, a year and a half, I was starting to touring.
Mm-hmm.
And the first time I started touring, I was very nervous because I'm like, oh my God, these brokers, they don't even think, they're probably going to look at me like. And so I was really good friends with one of the big mortgage lenders. And he, of course, knows all the brokers and things like that. And so he goes, Hoa, I see you at every conference. You show up everywhere. You're ready. Start submitting some offers. That's what you need to do next. Like, you're done passively investing. It's go time. And I was just like, well, And so he was like, you need to start submitting offers. I will go with you and I will tour with you. And so, I started touring with him. I started touring with some of the experienced co-GPs just because the brokers already knew them. And so I got really comfortable and I got really good with my underwriting. And I love numbers and spreadsheets and doing market analysis and like all of that. And Jaime loves boots on the ground stuff. Like, I don't like doing all the rent comps, and he secret shops everything, So he goes in, he does all in-person rent comps. And I like to do all the numbers and get to know the brokers, do the underwriting, and then equity and investor relations. Like, I love that space. And so, yeah, and that's how I just, probably, and then you're never ready. You never feel ready. You just got to put the gun and do it, because it's like, and then at that point I was like, I was underwriting and doing my own thing. But then I also, with the hope that once I win a deal, I would bring experienced co-GPs with me, right? Because I wanted someone who's strong in operations. I would never run the deal myself if I wasn't comfortable enough operating and like overlooking the management, especially the syndication. If it was my own property, no problem. But I think especially with these larger multifamily, I wanted someone who was strong as an asset manager, who was going to be really in tune with the financials every week, with capital projects, with operations, and managing the construction, general contractors. I wanted someone to partner with someone who was really strong in that. And so, I wound up underwriting a lot, but then eventually I had the opportunity to co-GP with someone else that I was already passive investors with. And that's how that kind of catapulted and really kind of helped it along much faster.
Yeah,
so cool.
And I want to just step back for a second. I know that we're kind of really deep into the syndication language, but I want to just give our first-time listeners who have never heard about syndications, what is syndication and how you've gotten into this. Again, you kind of talked about scaling, but love to kind of get the nuts and bolts of it.
Yeah, the nuts and bolts. So syndication, there's essentially just means a group of investors pool money together to buy a larger asset, right? And so you can syndicate anything. In this situation, it's for apartment investing. And so that's kind of our area now. We just focus mainly on apartments, but a syndication, there's general partners, and you'll hear the term interchangeably, GP or sponsors, but those are the ones who are actively doing the work, looking for the deal, getting the lending. Their name is on the lending. They're fronting the hard money, fronting all the up close cost, and the liability falls on the GP or sponsorship team. The LP are limited partners, and so they have ownership shares, and they can get in usually between 50 to 75,000 is usually the minimum for most of multifamily syndications. Some of them can be lower or higher, but those are the more common is 50 to 75. And so the limited partners have ownership share of that LLC. And so they truly get all the benefits. And so we always do what's called a cost segregation study. And so you get bonus depreciation. And so the benefit of both GP and LP, anybody who's in the syndication space who's part of that, gets all the benefits of the taxation of the K-1 losses. And that's something that's a little bit of a deeper topic, but the benefits, just the tax advantages, do get passed down even as a passive investor. And so that's the nice thing is that, with the equity from the LP combined with the equity of the GP, but the work and the expertise leveraging the GP team to do the work, that's the beauty of kind of the syndication space. And that's how essentially, kind of in a nutshell and very basic level, that's what a syndication is.
Yeah, I love that. Okay. I kind of want to make a pivot and kind of maybe go towards the understanding, your a bit of your identity and a bit about your background and circling back to that. I know you talked about your mom, you talked about your daughter, your husband is a big influence as well, and I want to talk about your powerful female influences and how they have maybe even impacted you or your business.
Yeah, the first very powerful influence and probably the most powerful influence in my life always has been and still is my mom. She's a powerhouse. Like I told you, she's like never was allowed to go to school. And to see someone who comes to America who doesn't speak the language, doesn't drive, doesn't have a formal education. She really doesn't even know how to read and write very well. It's very basic, right? But she was an entrepreneur. So in Vietnam, she was selling in the market. And so she passes down a lot of that entrepreneurship skill sets, and kind of that mindset, I think, is the biggest thing of just doing it. And I see her, she wound up having 6 businesses in America. Although not extravagant, they were businesses that, fed us and clothed us, and she was able to support us, right, to put us through school. And so she's been a big role model, and not just in the business world, but like from a personal sense, which I think is really important when you talk about managing all the different avenues. And obviously when you work a lot, the stress and fatigue and things like that, right? But she was always really good about, the importance of family and the importance of giving. And so even though we never had much growing up, we always housed homeless people or were giving to others. And I saw that with my parents, like even before my dad passed away, they were always giving, whatever it was. And so they were just loving people, very kind. And so that my mom, and she's always like that. And she's not the person in the limelight, but she's taught me so much. Like the woman who I am, if I could become half of the woman that my mom is, like, man, that would be freaking phenomenal. And so I want to be a role model like that for Athena, right? Because she's a super powerhouse woman in all sense, humility, kindness, business, like you name the different hats. Like, I'm like, bam, how did she do all that? You know, in the multifamily space, you know, real estate space, you know, I had read Rich Dad Poor Dad, and I met Sharon Lecter. And you know, Robert Kiyosaki is who most people will know for Rich Dad Poor Dad, and his name is currently on the book. But really, the partnership, and Sharon Lecter is really the one who kind of partnered with him and really is the writer behind all that in the mind. And she's such a role model in the women's space, and she's all about financial freedom and talks about assets and real estate and things like that. So she's a great role model for me, and to be able to spend personal time and get to know her on a deeper level, and the kindness of like the authenticity of who she truly is has been really, and I just spent in Phoenix with her, and I was in the British Virgin Islands for 5 days with her. And it was just, you know, so we're working on a book, and she wants to help me do my own solo book. I've done compilation books lately. And she really encouraged me to write my own book, and she's going to read through it, and she's going to help me create this book. So I'm super excited about whenever.
Oh my gosh.
I don't know when.
So excited. We are definitely promoting it. By the way, your last book we've promoted on our newsletter, and you know, so we're here for Hoa. How awesome!
But you know, there's so many other powerful women. You know, when you talk about powerful women, I don't see powerful women just in the space of like business. Obviously, business is one, but I meet so many. Like, I want more women in the real estate space. Obviously. You know, that's been one of my big missions, is to be able to help more women get into the real estate space and just get educated and know that it's possible, you know. And I think the more that other people see other women just like them doing it, the more there's courage to like, okay, well, she can do it, I can do it, you know.
Yeah.
And so,
it's crazy because I've been to a lot of conferences, done a lot of deals, a lot of people that are in the industry, and you just see, like, I mean, it's overwhelmingly men. Like, and it's just like, you look at it and you're like, oh, you know, there might be a little bit of a diversity problem here, you know. And like, as much as, you know, and so like when I see, you know, women like you doing it well in this space, I'm just like, oh my God, I'm like all holding on to each other, be like, don't let this one go.
But not only doing it well, right? Hoa, what I love about Hoa, and Anita and I have talked about this at length, is that you're a very like sharp business person, but you also lead with kindness, right? Because when you think of like a shark, a business shark, you think of someone who's like ruthless and like, you know, takes every edge and is like super predatory. But I feel like you're so smart and you just lead with kindness that, you know, you provide the value and then the money follows. And I think that's very inspirational for me and Anita, where it's almost like you could just be this gorgeous, like, you basically have it all. You're like beautiful. It's like there's always like this misconception that like these CEOs have to be like hyper masculine and, you know, just like ball busting all the time, but you're totally not that, and you're successful, which I think is so inspiring. Like, I love you.
Oh, I so appreciate you. I'm just like any other woman, you know. I go through same struggles just like everybody else, right? And you know, I have my good days, I have my struggle days, just like everyone else. But I do, you know, at the end of the day, for me, I always remind myself, and a lot of it, I have to thank both my parents, because that's been so ingrained in me. And my mom will bring me right back to reality. If like a little bit of ego or anything, like, she'll bring me right back to reality. You know?
Same. It's like an Asian mom thing. Be like, don't think you're so great. We actually don't have that much money. I'm like, okay, never mind.
And so, you know, and that diversity, you know, a lot of people always ask me, that's always a top question, you know, being a woman, especially in the real estate, multifamily space, especially, you know, how you get treated. And for me, you know, I think it's an advantage. I leverage it as an advantage, because obviously you will stand out more. lenders, brokers, and once they see, and it's all about execution, you know. And at the beginning of my journey, I was quiet. I just kind of did my work. I was always, you know, and I just always showed up. I follow through. And when you're doing business, like your reputation follows, and regardless, it's a small circle of people and word will spread. And especially when you get into the multifamily space, people will know your investors, your brokers, the lenders who do business with you. So you just want to be known as someone who's easy to work with, who's kind. And that's something that I encourage, you know, that's just who you are. You don't have to come up and put like a face on, and I never was, you know. And so I always treated everyone with respect, whether they were in the insurance business, whether they were lenders, because all of those are relationships that connect you. And so for me, long-term relationship and just always knowing it's people, right? Regardless of what avenue or what service, whether they're maintenance or whatnot, it doesn't matter. Like they're all people and they're so integral and part of the business. And so I think if you start having that where you don't think like you're above anybody, and regardless of where you are, I think if you keep that through life and just be kind to people, because I know how I was treated when I was working, doing, you know, I did random jobs. I was doing nails and I was working at the coffee shop. I was like, you know, in my mom's store, and I was getting called names, you know. And so, you know, I know what it's like to be treated a certain way. You know, and I never wanted people to feel that way, right? And so diversity, I think leveraging being a woman is actually to an advantage. And so I honestly, you know, most people think, well, it must be hard. Most men have actually been really kind and helpful to me in the business. I really haven't experienced much like, oh, you know, kind of thing. Occasionally we'll get one or two brokers who might kind of throw us off like that. And maybe it's not because I'm a woman or diversity or anything like my ethnic, but maybe because they just don't know who I am, right? They don't want you to waste your time if they don't know if you're going to close with certainty, right? And so I don't know. Even if they did view me as, even if they did kind of like, you know, I think I'll use that as fuel to like, okay, that'll give me an incentive to even do better, right? Let me show you. Like, let me not tell you, but let me show you.
Right. I love that. I love how it just like brings fuel to the fire. Be like, okay, I'm just gonna show you. I'm gonna outpace you, and then I'm gonna own whatever property you're gonna. Yeah, and I love that. I think that's truly the way that I think we can, you know.
But the balance is important. Nita, you know, you had talked about being a woman and a mom and a wife, and you know, and to me, the end, you know, I say I'm passionate about real estate. And so I'm passionate about eye care too. I love my patients. I've put a lot of sweat and tears into doing it. But now to be able to balance it and to travel and spend time with my daughter and my husband, and to do the mission work and things that we love to do, it's just choices. At the end of the day, I say real estate is a vehicle for freedom and impact, right? To have choices, right? But I love it all, you know, but you give and take, and you have to prioritize and put on different hats at different time to be fully present in whatever you're doing, you know. So time blocking and things like that, making sure when I'm with my daughter and my family, like it's them, it's just them. I don't, and then if I'm working with investors or on a project, then I give them my full attention at that time. But I break it up so that, you know, my time is allocated, because we all have the same amount of time and energy. It's like you have to be able to allocate that and take care of yourself, because at the end of the day, you don't want to get burned out.
Yeah, and I think that we say that all the time on this show and this podcast about what the mission of SARE Ladies really is to be able to give women the agency to do what they want to do in life, whether it's focus more on their family, leave terrible jobs, leave terrible situations. And I think that's one of those things that real estate has such a power to do. And I think the more that we share with each other, the more that women can have this under their tool belt to be like, okay, you know, we don't have to, you know, I may have this practice that I feel chain to, maybe like the the golden chain to, and but real estate can be like, okay, you can do part of it, so I can have a family, I can have the time to kind of do what I want, or travel, or not do any of those things.
Yeah, real estate
So
is such a powerful
Mhm.
vehicle to allow us to do that. And there's so many vehicles of real estate to do it.
Yeah. So I guess leads me to my last question, but what can we fundamentally do as women for each other to bring more diversity into the real estate game?
You guys are doing the perfect example of starting that. I think having SARE Ladies, I love what you're doing with the podcast. The upcoming field trip that you're doing, like hands-on training. To have conferences is great, but to actually be able to go out, meet different people who are in the real estate space, get to talk to them, get to tour properties and see the type of asset classes and type of real estate and markets. Like, I think that helps us. Like, I think having other women who are doing what you guys, I think that's great. Podcasting, like having people come conferences, meetups, even, books and things like that. So just a resource so people have, where it's like, okay, well, here's a whole set of women in real estate, that it's a community, and building communities and ecosystems where it's a trust factor, where people can come and, like, it doesn't matter where you are in your real estate journey. If you're like really, really beginning, or you're very experienced, there's always more to learn. Like, I'm always still learning. I still go to conferences all the time, and I'm not so like, okay, I'm only in this space. I am open to always learning and diversifying. It's just when you're first starting out and you find something that works, you kind of want to like focus in to kind of get that expertise going. But then after that, you want to diversify your money and to work for you and whatever makes sense. And, so I think that's important. Number one is to build a community, which you guys are doing. And I love that.
Thank you. That's such a high compliment coming from someone we admire so much.
Yeah, and thanks so much. So excited. I'm so excited to see you soon on our field trip, and I'm not sure. I'm not sure by the time that we air this podcast that we'll have any tickets left. So, I mean, please check the link in our show notes, because we like, Hoa will be here. She's gonna be like, we need to all be together and support each other in this crazy journey of real estate, because it's not done alone, right? It's done with mentors. It's done with so many people that are just sharing knowledge, how to be in it, to do it, to shake hands and then learn. That's really how you learn.
That's right.
Yeah, and yeah. So thank you so much. How can our listeners find you if they're looking for you? Wow.
Yeah, there's a couple of ways. So our website is passivewealth23.com. And so people can go on there, and it'll have our website, and there's contact us form. So you can fill that out, and then we'll reach out so we can schedule a call. But if you also text the word passive to 26786, that can also get you on our list. And what we are starting to do, so we do quarterly newsletters currently already. We're starting monthly webinars that are just free educational webinars. We hosted one already, and we should be hosting our next one soon, to deep dive into underwriting. And so anything you want to know in the multifamily syndication space, every month we'll be hosting educational content to kind of go behind and go deeper than kind of what's out there already, and kind of take you on some of the things that are not shared as often. And so I want to kind of show the kind of deep, a little bit more than, because time-wise, it's hard to go just the very basics. And so most of the time what you see is very basic. And so what we want to do with these monthly ones are really deep dive, so you can really see actual numbers, actual problems, actually wins, and kind of see the ins and outs of the business a little bit more. And that's what I really want to share with people, because it's not easy. but it's great. It's super rewarding, but I want people to know the truth of what goes into the business, and so that's what I'd like to share. So if anybody wants to reach out, website, text the word passive. There's a due diligence checklist. As soon as you text that word, you'll get like a 50-point due diligence checklist, which is like, if you were ever wanting to passively invest in syndications, these are things you should look for. And these are kind of with markets, with the team, things that you should know about, your due diligence before you invest.
I love that. And just to bring this full circle, everybody go to Hua's website and let her inject your eyeballs with real estate education.
I promise I will not inject anyone's eyes.
Metaphorically, she will inject, figuratively, she will inject your eyeballs with all this helpful education to get you all started on your real estate journey. Full circle.
Thanks, Tiffany. Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
for
Hoa.
everything.
Thank you.
Hey Pod Squatters, we hope you enjoyed today's episode of SARE Ladies, thanks to the support from our following sponsor. Do you have ambitious goals that you're committed to but feel stuck or stopped when trying to achieve them? Ganga Tarwadi from the SARE Ladies panel at SARECon has 16 years of performance coaching experience and is an expert at helping people overcome procrastination, eliminate negative emotions, and break through limiting beliefs to attract teams, lead communities, and build wealth. Ganga's highly customized personal coaching sessions are normally $2,500 for 5 sessions. However, for a short time, Ganga is offering them for half price at $1,250 and including a 6th bonus session to help you get your breakthrough. Use promo code SARELadies100 for an additional $100 discount at checkout. Sign up at infiniteperform.com/breakthrough. Thanks for hanging with the SARE Ladies. Until next time.